Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to Offstage. We are so thrilled that each week you join with us. We know we missed last week. We're sorry, but we're excited to be here with you today and continuing our discussion. Double Dean, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Love doing this with you. It's a blast.
We have a thing. We would get in trouble if we put out the other conversations we have in this room, and we can't. That's a separate
Highly
podcast.
Edited.
Highly edited. That's right. But
we have to act like this is a burden too.
It is. This is incredibly tough to sit and talk, and people just don't understand.
Right.
How we have an absolute blast. It's a good thing we get along because being in a small room in the basement, I think I could take you, but that's the way it is. But we are excited to continue this discussion. We're going to kind of recap where we were 2 weeks ago as we talked through the doctrines of the church, and this has been fun because it hopefully you guys think it's fun. I think it's been enjoyable because it helps you see these what people would say kind of boring, plate type issues in a new light because they do really impact all the other fundamental things that you believe.
So it's really worth talking about, not just glancing at and signing, when you join an organization, join a church. Definitely. I was saying that to God today, just the subject we're going to talk about today, it matters what we believe. And then it leads to, speaking out in our culture. It leads to how we counsel people and our friends and family that go through this. And
absolutely.
It makes a big difference.
Today we're talking about our belief about people.
Right.
And so it is going to impact. It's going to impact the way you interact with your coworkers. It's going to impact the way you interact with your family.
Right.
It's going to impact how you vote. It's going to impact all of these things. Like it just impacts a lot of different things. And so don't walk away from this and understand. And now here's the deal. We know in these there are churches that have way different beliefs. And in a lot of these beliefs, you can take scriptures in different places and make different arguments and things like that. But I personally, I think this one's a hard one when we start talking about people. This is a hard one to argue with as far as doctrinally. So 2 weeks ago, we started talking about the belief statement. Like I said, what we're doing is walking through. If you're new to this, you stumbled upon this by accident. We are walking through the doctrinal statements that we have as our church that we call essential. We live by essentials and non-essentials. And even outside on our building, it says in essentials, unity, in opinions, liberty, and in all things, love. And so there are certain essentials that we believe that if you're going to be a part of our church, these are things that we have to have as our building blocks that we can go from, and then we can have discussion. This is not having a glass of wine. This is not that kind of stuff. It's bigger, deeper things than that. It's the doctrine of Jesus. It's the doctrine of baptism. It's the doctrine of the Bible, believing the Bible is the true word of God. Today we're talking about people. So to kind of recap, we started the conversation 2 weeks ago with this statement. We believe that every person has worth as a creation of God. Doesn't matter, black, white, purple, green, gay, straight, whatever. Every person has value. God doesn't make junk.
Right. And the value comes from the maker, not the usefulness, right?
Yeah, it's a great way to say it.
So I like the $20 bill.
Mm-hmm.
You take out, like I've got some new ones in my wallet, and
don't have to brag.
I can hold it out and say, "Hey, who wants this $20 bill?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll take it. And then you take it and you smush it up, and then you're like, "Oh, why'd you do that? Who wants the $20 bill? I still want it." And then you take it and you put it down, and you stomp on it and get it all dirty. Do you still want it? Why? Because it still has the worth, even if it's traumatized, smashed, crumpled, even if you're not your best. And so this represents people. Another one I heard was Max Lucado's one about the sweater his mother made for him. And he said it never fit. It was, he never really could use it. But, 20, 30 years later, it was still in his closet because his mother made it out of love for him. And it wasn't the usefulness or even whether he ever wore it. It was like, man, this was made in love for me. And that's where our worth comes from, that a loving God made us in his image, not whether we're, useful to a society. And the scary thing is when you begin to decide that a life's not worth living, that's what led to the Holocaust. When they started entertaining that question, it's like, oh no.
Well, and it's really interesting because this is where we see the fundamental difference. You said it. Our value is based in who created us.
Right.
According to the world, a person's value is based upon what they can do or
Right.
what they can provide or whatever. That's not it.
Right.
So you look at people who have handicaps. You look at people with any type of disability or people
Or
who older people.
Yeah, living.
Whatever. Everybody has
Assisted
value.
living.
Everybody has value, and I think that's really really interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
I got to go back. Did your mom ever make clothes for you?
And no, I can't
No.
remember. I don't think.
Okay, so this will reveal my age. My mom, when I was younger, made me some like MC Hammer pants. Like, oh, you remember MC Hammer, big
Yeah.
baggy MC? Oh yeah, they were neon green, had Save the Trees on them, and my mom thought they were the cat's meow. But looking back, I should have probably given myself a wedgie. But that's a whole another thing. But oh yeah, we made some stuff like that. But yeah, my mom would make my sisters like prom dresses and stuff like that, and she was pretty good at the whole sewing and the
That's
fabric
awesome.
and all that stuff. But she never made me a suit, so I probably appreciate that. She did buy me a suit, but not anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's interesting, and if you have breath, you have purpose. If you have purpose, you have value. God sees everything like that, and God takes care of everything. The flowers, the birds. I'm outside mowing the grass, and it always just reminds me God takes care of all of that.
Yeah.
And he promises to take care of you because you're the one that he breathed his breath of life into. That's what sets you apart, sets us apart as humans from everything else. As much as your dog matters and you love Fifi and all that, you matter because you are created in the image of God. Your neighbor is created in the image of God. The people you don't like are created in the image of God. So every person has value.
Right. And there's a difference between hunting and a murdering spree. I mean, everybody would
Right.
get that. It's like as much as some people seem to value animals more than people,
Right.
there is still the point that even if you don't agree with hunting and you love animals and you don't like hunting, you would still see a huge difference between that and killing people. And the difference there is, and I love that. Let me ask you that. What comes to your mind when you think of, how are we different from the animals? Which is, of course, that we're made in the image of God. What does that mean? What are some things we do the animals don't do?
You're going to get me.
And
You're going
for
to get
you,
me
I
in
can't
trouble.
think of one.
You're going to get me in trouble. Okay. I believe we have a cognitive ability. I
Right.
think that's where the soul and spirit come into play.
Of course,
I mean, I
yeah.
know dogs always have this feel. You always feel like a dog can tell your emotions and knows
Right.
when you need to be whatever. And I think that's awesome. But I think we have a whole nother.
Yeah.
I don't know that animals discern right from wrong.
Right. It's more
It's not a moral thing.
They don't have
It's an
moral
instinct
conscience,
thing.
yeah.
How they train deer to cross at the sign, I never know.
Right.
But they do it. It's just kidding.
Right.
But that kind of thing. So I think it's that moral right from wrong. To
Right.
him who knows what to do and doesn't do it, it's sin, and that kind of thing. I think that's the biggest difference. As much as it looks like a dog can empathize, I think it's a trained response. They know you're sad and this makes you happy, and so that's
and
kind
they
of the way
don't
it is.
talk. They don't
talk.
communicate.
Yeah.
They don't create, right?
Create is a great way to look at
they
it.
don't like write novels and build skyscrapers, and they don't create. Yeah, those are and relationships. I think they have, family, and again, I want to be sensitive to that, but we are more complex in our ability to relate to other people. I think.
Well, and it's interesting because I believe that maybe I said it this way. I think we make them have more character and stuff because we make them part of our family.
Oh, that's a good point.
That we put that on them because we are the creator, we are the whatever. We put that on them. They're part of the family.
Right.
Like, sounds horrible, but if that dog never came into your family, that dog would have survived just fine.
Right.
You're impacted by it.
Right.
I mean, that's thing. And now I'm more of a dog person than a cat person. I don't have any pets. I have 3 children, and that's enough. But I don't have any pets. But I'm a dog person more than a cat person. But it's people have all kinds of things, and I think but it also shows that I think that proves our creative mindset that we can take care of.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing.
Oh
So,
yeah. So, but those things are important because that goes to the value of human life. Is because we're made in the image of God.
Yeah.
He formed creation. What he spoke it into existence, but he reserved his very breath for man. There's just a special sense, and that isn't us saying, "Look at us, wow." It just says that's why people are traumatized when they take life.
Yeah.
So if you had to go to war, even if it was an accident, I happened to have and the result of the accident was it killed a child or something. It takes people their whole life to get over that.
Yeah.
and or if you actually murder someone, or we'll get into abortion, different things.
Yeah.
It starts with, we should understand the value of human life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I even remember to this day, at 16 years old, I got into a car accident, and I broke a lady's ribs. Like the way my car, I hit ice and my car spun,
Oh,
and
wow.
I T-boned
You never told me that story.
the driver's side door of a Cadillac, and I broke both her ribs. I still think about that. Like,
Wow.
I didn't kill her. I didn't. It wasn't even my fault.
you-
Like it
but
was.
it
It was. I
impacted
hit
her.
black ice, but I just thought about that. Like
Yeah.
and now I remind my daughter, who's now driving, like this machine.
Right.
But the value of life, it matters and
Yeah.
it cares. That also changes the way we view things. It changes the way we view church.
Right.
Because I may go to church and like, oh, okay, that was okay. But for somebody else, it might have been really, really good.
Right.
And so if I value every life the way I value mine, and I think, Paul says in Philippians, think of others as higher than yourselves. I should probably value my life as less than others. And then it changes the way I view church. It changes the way I view standing in line at the grocery store. It changes the way all of that kind of stuff. I'm less likely to honk at the person in front of me at the red light. Not that I still do, but I mean, like,
So it's not our opinion; it's God's opinion that gives people value. It's like,
Yeah.
it's what He thinks of the life He made that we have to agree with. We have to say, oh,
right.
God looks at that person and they're extremely important, so treat them well and don't hurt them, don't kill them.
Yeah, regardless of the situation. And that's where it gets really tricky as we get into the next statement. Our next doctrinal statement. Obviously, we believe all people have value. But then you got to come up with the question is, when did they become all people?
Right.
And so the next doctrinal statement is that we believe in the sanctity of life from conception to death. This is one that people go back and forth on.
Right.
I've had conversations with people, and in that conversation, I discovered that they don't believe that life begins at conception. They believe life begins at birth.
Right.
It changes the dynamic, and it helps me understand exactly where they're coming from.
Right.
Because if you don't believe that life begins at conception, and you believe life begins at birth, then anything that happens before birth is not taking a life because
Right.
you don't believe it's life.
And then there's another position at viability when the baby formed in the womb is able to survive if you were to take it out of the
Right.
mother, no longer dependent upon the mother, big enough to survive. That's another position they just call viability.
Yeah.
And so conception, viability, or when that baby finally comes out and takes a breath, they'll liken it to God breathing into
Yep.
the first creation. So they think, and I think one of the famous church fathers even took that position, was like,
Sure.
the breath is when it's actually life, And anyway, so yeah, those are the
Yeah.
three.
Yeah, so that's the three kind of beliefs we adhere to biblically. We see this, that life begins at the moment of conception, not at the moment of birth. You're actually 9 months older than you think you are.
Yeah.
Your
Right.
birthday, but that would be weird if you celebrated that as your birthday, because that's a whole nother conversation. But I mean, yeah, right?
Yeah.
But Psalm 139, this is what he writes. He says, "For you created my inmost being; you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." That's one of the most famous passages that's used. Jeremiah 1 says it this way. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart, and I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. So, the argument is even before conception, God knew.
Right.
The Apostle Paul, you go to the New Testament, Galatians 1,
Right.
he says, "But when God, who set me apart from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, was pleased." My favorite story to talk about in this is in Luke 1,
Yes.
when
Both
Mary,
babies.
when Mary, goes to Elizabeth, walks in the house, Mary has just been told that she's pregnant with the Son of God. What happens?
Yeah, Elizabeth got John further along, but still in the womb.
Yes, 6 months.
Cousin John
Mhm.
leaps in the womb
He-
because
yeah,
he
he-
said he's filled with the Spirit from the time he was
Yeah.
in his womb.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and-
so he instantly, without
womb.
even Mary saying, "I'm pregnant with the Son of God,"
Right.
John just goes nuts.
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen, when your wife was pregnant, you got to see the baby kicking, and I mean, all of a sudden the belly just changes shapes, and it's amazing. But it's interesting, and so this will make people really, really upset who are pro-choice.
Well, and let me say on that,
Yeah.
the Bible calls John at that point. It says the baby leapt, and it uses the same word as the baby in the manger. It's the same.
So there you
Greek
go,
word.
same Greek word.
Because that's the other problem you have if you don't think it's life in the womb. What are you going to call it?
Yeah.
And fetus, blob of tissue. I mean,
Yeah.
part of the woman's body. I mean, really? That's the tough thing. Are you sure? Because you got to be sure if you're going to take the life. Responsibility's
Right.
on you to make sure it's not a human life. So you got to call it something and be sure it's something else than a baby. Don't want to call it a baby. Well, the Bible actually calls John a baby. When it said the baby leapt in the womb. So it
That's
is
a great
baby.
point.
Yeah, but it was an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in our culture, we really have two sides. You have pro-choice
Right.
and pro-life. I don't think that that's a fair argument. I like to tell people that I am pro-choice. I said, but we're talking about the wrong choice.
Right. It's all so much rhetoric.
We're talking about the wrong choice. I believe that everybody has a choice.
Right.
Everybody does not
That's a
get to
great point.
everybody does not get to choose the consequences of their action.
Right.
If I am not ready to have a baby, I should not do the things that could lead me to having a baby.
Right.
And so that was and that was always the way I talk to students about it. I'm like, look, here's the deal. We know the process. We know what has to happen.
Right.
This is a scientific thing. Make the choice. Make the choice. Once you choose, then the consequences, the results are out of your hands.
Right.
And I think that creates a bigger conversation about our culture. I believe the culture of our world does not want to deal with the consequences of their actions.
I love that, and you're just going off the word choice.
Yeah.
Which, let's go back in the argument in the debate. They're trying to say the woman has a choice, right?
Sure.
They're trying to bring out the fact that it's her choice what she would like to do, but this is another person now,
Right.
And it's one of the worst times to make that choice. It's one of the toughest times to make a decision because there's so much trauma and surprise and difficulty. So yeah, it is a battle of rhetoric, the choice in life, or they'll anti-abortion. I mean, it's just how you word things that brings out.
Well,
For me, it's not theoretical though, and my sister has given me the permission to say this, but basically, the sister I'm closest to in age went through this in her sort of wild time, and so it's not theoretical for me, and I think that's the difference.
Yeah.
You have to in a lot of these things, you have to start with one person and not just a debate, and then you realize what it's really like. And I know for her, she had a major dateline through this spiritually and learned to trust God and learn to experience God. And sometimes we just haven't thought about it. We haven't realized how important it is that we could help someone, that we could minister. And again, it all starts with what we believe and deciding what we believe. What helps me, Scott, is to think, okay, like if I'm going hunting with my son, Rick, let's just say, and we get separated in the woods, and I see some movement over in the woods, and I'm like, is that a deer or is that my son? And then you don't shoot, you
Right.
go, well, I'm not going to shoot till I make sure that's not
Till
my
I
son
know.
over there. And so this is the point. If you're going to take the life, you don't have to just have an opinion. You have to be sure, And so I would challenge anyone who's pro-abortion, who is feeling like they can make that decision. Are you sure that life begins when that baby takes a breath, and or when it's viable or big enough for you to be impressed and go, I can
Right.
see it now, and stuff like that. And I asked two questions to be sure, or I would ask people to ask two questions and answer them satisfactorily before you can be sure. And that is what was it 1 minute before, and what happened to make it life? Okay,
Those are great questions.
So when they're born and they take a breath, okay, if that's your position, then you go, okay, all right, what was it 1 minute before? So here's this baby ready to just come out and take a breath, make the 8-inch journey out of the birth canal, and it's fully formed, capable. Oh, it's going to turn pink the second it takes a breath, and you're going to say before it's not life, and then what happened to make it life? Oh, it took a breath. That's enough for you,
Yeah.
And then I go to the viability, and it's all arbitrary. It's like, where in that point, and it's basically, if anyway, I don't want to go too far on that. But
No,
ask the
I think
question,
that's those are great questions.
right.
All right. So the questions are, what was it a minute before?
And then what
And
happened to
what
make it
happened
life?
to make it
Because
life?
when you get to conception, that's the only place you can answer that solidly. What was it 1 minute before? It was a egg and a sperm.
Right.
What happened to make it life? The process of fertilization. And now
Right.
you have a single cell with all the DNA for life. So that's the only place we can solidly answer. So that's the point from which we must protect it.
Right.
But if you get to, well, I don't know, it's so tiny, I can't. It's in 2 months it's as big as a finger.
Right.
So it's so small. That's not really life. It's like, oh, are large people more alive than small people? Or what about the people dependent on insulin?
Right.
A baby that's still dependent on the mother doesn't mean it's not a human that deserves to be protected. These are some of the things that I think about that just make it arbitrary. And then I realize that's not how they're making the decision anyway.
No.
And the other point was, well, what about the rape and the health of the mothers being threatened, or the child is going to be deformed or
Right.
have Down syndrome? Those are actually 3% of all abortions. Those three,
Right.
and the other 97% are, I'm embarrassed, I can't afford it, I don't like the father, I'm not sure how to raise a child. These are the 97% of the time.
And this is
reasons,
where
yeah.
we begin to see our doctrines mesh, because I don't even want to sit here and pretend to understand what it would be like for someone who went through a sexual assault
Right.
that ended up getting pregnant,
Right.
and the feelings and the emotions and all of that. I can't even pretend. I can almost understand both sides of that argument.
Right.
What I do know, it goes back to my doctrine, is that I believe that God is perfect and right and just, and nothing in this world happens that he is surprised by. And so trusting him, even when it doesn't make sense
Right.
in our world standards, trusting him when it doesn't make sense for the health. I mean, you hear the incredible stories of the doctor said that this baby was going to be deformed, and now all of a sudden the baby comes
Right.
out and there's nothing wrong.
But we
It-
give so
yeah.
much time to those arguments, and I'm just saying that's a fraction
It
of
is.
the abortion.
It's very minuscule. Most of the people
but
fall
even
into
in
the
those cases, and really so often the 97%, it's the circumstances of the conception were a mistake, but the baby is not. The baby's a miracle.
That's a great way to say it.
Yeah, that's another way to put it. And people have found the baby to be a salvation. The baby's like, oh, that's the God part in the midst of this mess. Is still this baby is a gift, and to follow through and do the right thing is the way out from this vicious cycle that created the circumstances of the conception. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't use the word mistake. It was the result of a poor choice.
Right.
It's one.
Right.
I talk about how everybody has a plan. When you got married, you guys probably had a plan for, okay, we're going to go this many years, and then we're going to have kids, and then we're
Right.
going to we were like, okay, if we got pregnant on our honeymoon, yeah, that was not the plan. That would have made the beginning
Right.
of our marriage a little bit more difficult, but it is what it is. You don't have to be
Right.
afraid of that. And again, but it goes back to all of these doctrines and things like that tie together, because we believe that God has a plan and purpose for us. This is why God tells you that sex should be reserved for marriage. That
Right.
that all of those kinds of things, because within those confines, there is a plan. And yes, the 3% is the argument that everybody brings up
Right.
of this, but to sit there, and you don't want to minimize people in a personal journey who have to deal with that.
That's
the sa-
true. Two
at-
guys
yeah.
sitting here. Yeah.
at the and I don't want to, because if you're watching this and you're like, well, I went, listen, I will also tell you that this is not an unforgivable thing. This is not
Right.
this is not something that God is going to go, well, you're done and we're out of here. Like,
Right.
God can move you and work through you, and God doesn't waste or hurt. And there's a lot of people who went through this, like your sister,
Yeah.
who now are able to sit with people in that moment and have that conversation with them.
Right. But it's loving to say what it is and face what it is, like any sin. Like
Yeah.
all our sins,
It's-
we
it's-
should realize the seriousness of them as God helps us and forgives and heals us. We don't want to fool ourselves by not facing the seriousness of what we did. And we've all sinned greatly. So
And it becomes
not
part of your
acting
story, part of
holy,
your
yeah.
redemption, part of all of these things.
Right.
that God can
You have
use.
to accept the heaviness of it, and then you'll be able to understand and help the others who are making those same choices and need that same healing and that same grace. And God's grace is greater, but man, we've got to face the seriousness and help people. I've talked to so many people. It's like, I never thought of it that way, and now I realize that's true.
Yeah.
And then wake up to the seriousness of it, and then begin to have that conviction, speak out, vote, counsel other people. It makes a difference, especially in our society when 1 out of every 4 babies conceived are aborted.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
the incredible stat.
And this is, and that probably doesn't even count the Plan B,
Right.
all of these kinds of things.
Right.
And that's why we tell you, we will stand up. And again, I don't want to be political at all, but I will tell you, I will stand up and tell you for me personally, one of the biggest things I look at when it comes to voting time is this right here, the
Right.
sanctity of life.
Right.
Of do they believe that life begins, and does their track record back up to it? Do they believe that life begins at conception? Because I do. I believe the Bible makes it really, really clear.
Yeah.
I don't believe that my kids became my kids when they were born. I
Right.
believe they became my kids when they were created.
Right.
And that kind of thing. And you know, you go through that. And the flip side, the crazy arguments, you know, you talk about people who have had pregnancies that were ended, you know, with health issues, or they
Right.
lost the baby.
Yeah.
You know, you very rarely do they go, I lost the fetus. It's I lost the baby.
know.
And so
It's
we have
so
this
difficult.
argument on one side or the
And
other.
they know the name, and they look forward to seeing him in heaven, and there's a tremendous grief, and that shows it too. The other thing is that is so important to do is to recognize that there are organizations like PDHC
Yes.
in Columbus and here in Lancaster who average almost 1,000 lives saved, where they'll convince the
Yeah.
mother, and 80+% of the time when the mother is shown or can hear the heartbeat, chooses not to abort.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
That's fascinating.
It's like over 80% of the time, and they have the sonogram, and they can come in and they can hear the heartbeat and see the baby. And when they do, and it's not like, because that's the other thing,
Yeah.
to be human, it has to be visible. That's the other crazy thing. I
Yeah.
can't see it. It's so small. It's not really there. It's not really life. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, okay, 80% of the time. Let me show you. You can see it, and there's a heartbeat, and the mother's like, I'm not going to abort 80% of the time. And so they're on the front lines, and we should support them financially and volunteer and send baby,
Baby bottles and baby clothes
and
and-
mentoring. And there's so much in there. But they are actively, again, just 80, 90 times a month that they're talking mothers into saving their babies. Yeah.
And there's and we got to talk about, like, because you automatically think of it. Well, I can't have a kid, and I have to keep my kid. There's this other option where there are families who literally can't
That's
have
true.
children that are almost dying.
They would
to
so
have. They would
love to
so
not have
love
to
that.
wait like 5 years.
And
Yeah.
while that may not be the most convenient avenue to take,
Right.
there's so many things. And so I want you to hear this and understand. One, please know we're not throwing rocks at anybody.
Right.
Everybody has to formulate their own personal beliefs. We're just laying out what we believe the Bible says and what we've done in our studies and what
Yeah.
our families adhere to. And people have to make choices. But again, we're going to go back to respecting people, because every life has matter. Whether you believe me or not, whether you believe the same thing as I or not, we can have respect for each other. And so understand that if you have gone through an abortion or something like this and you had your reasons, nobody hates you. Nobody hates you. We love you. We know that a lot of times keeping those things secret can cause all kinds of internal struggle that you feel that manifests itself, on Mother's Day and so many other things. And God loves you. God cares about you. God wants a relationship with you. There's nothing he can't heal. I firmly believe that there's nothing he can't heal, the hurt that's in you.
Right. And he uses us sometimes the most from our weakness, from our
and he
greatest
can use
weakness.
us. I was just talking to somebody the
Yeah.
other day about an experience we had at my last church, probably almost 15 years ago. There was a family who lost their baby in the last couple weeks of the pregnancy. And as pastors, we're like, I can sit with you and share scripture and pray with you. I can't. I never lost a baby.
Right.
My wife had 3 healthy pregnancies. There was a couple in our church that 10 years prior had almost the exact same situation. And because they were willing to open their life and share it, we just took them and said, hey, go sit with it. You know exactly what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible moment where they heal. And so I don't believe that God can waste that, and God can do amazing things with that. But
And like I said, it can be a Dateline experience where you, for the first time, trust God.
yeah,
And then move forward with consistency and live so differently from the way that caused that, and that's true for all of us.
Right.
We're all sinners, and we just need to be saved and move forward, and God is ready to do that no matter what the sin. But we in our society, we have to face that there is a tremendous value to life.
yeah. Well, so there is our podcast on life.
Yeah.
We believe that every person has worth as creation of God, including the unborn.
Right.
And we believe in the sanctity of life from conception to death.
Right.
We believe that life begins at conception and life ends at death. Well, at least life on this earth. Eternity is a long time, and we get to spend time, which makes us different. I get in a whole other conversation from animals, but that's the whole thing. Well, there you go. Now, I will let you know, we've got probably one more of these podcasts to go through the doctrines. We're talking about marriage and all these kinds of things. And then we're probably going to take a couple-week break as we figure out going into the new year and the school year, and we're going to be doing some things with the school and things like that. But we'll keep you posted, and we'll be back. We enjoy this. I think we want to continue it. It just may look a little different.
Yeah.
So there you go. Continue to go out. Continue to be the message. If something here has sparked a conversation with you, feel free to reach out to Dean or I or get the help that you need. We'd love to continue those conversations with you. Thank you for being with us. We hope you continue to go out and be the message. Have a great week.